Christmas Carol, plot and key events. Stave 1, Scrooge. Marley's ghost. In the opening lines, we are told by the narrator that Marley has died, and Dickens really emphasises this fact so that when Marley's ghost first appears, we understand that his ghost is real. The narrator explains this to us, saying, "This must be distinctly understood," and by this he means the fact that Marley is dead, "or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate." So Dickens explains to us that we need to understand that Marley is dead so that we believe in the ghost when he appears. We learn that Marley was Scrooge's business partner when he was alive, and that after his death, Scrooge was the only person to attend his funeral. However, even Scrooge was not very upset by the death of Marley. Scrooge made sure to get a bargain, which suggests that he didn't care about the funeral very much. We are told that old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Dickens uses a simile, as dead as a doornail, to create an image of something that is totally lifeless, a nail, to emphasise the fact that Marley is dead. In Stave 1, we learn that Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name from the warehouse door of the business where they worked, and he doesn't seem to care whether people call him Scrooge or Marley. He responds to both. The narrator describes Scrooge's greedy and selfish personality to us. We are told that the only thing that Scrooge cares about is making money. He doesn't spend his money, however, because he is a miser. A miser is a person who saves all of their money and spends as little of it as possible. The narrator describes Scrooge as a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Dickens creates an image of someone holding onto their money tightly, and the use of a list really emphasises that Scrooge is a selfish, greedy, and a miser. We are told that Scrooge is as hard and sharp as a flint. A flint is a hard, sharp grey rock. People use flint to start a fire by striking it against steel, which creates a spark, igniting the fire. The adjective sharp also implies that Scrooge is cruel and he can cause pain to others with his behaviour and words. Additionally, the adjective sharp could symbolise that Scrooge is an intelligent character who uses his intelligence as a creditor to exploit his debtors, the poor and the vulnerable. Now, a creditor is a person who has lent money to someone else, and a debtor is the person they have lent money to. So a debtor has borrowed money from someone and he now owes them repayment of the debt. The adjective hard creates the impression that Scrooge is a harsh person. He has a rough exterior which is similar to that of the flint, hence the comparison. We are told that Scrooge is as solitary as an oyster. An oyster is a shellfish, a sea creature which lives inside a shell. The adjective solitary tells us that Scrooge is a lonely and isolated figure. He chooses to spend all his time alone, and he rejects all offers of friends and family. A simile is a comparison between two things, and it will always use the words like or as. So in as solitary as an oyster, the comparison of Scrooge to an oyster uses the word as. The simile compares Scrooge to an oyster, which creates an image of the hard and brittle shell of an oyster, suggesting that Scrooge has a hard and tough exterior. A pearl is a precious stone, typically round and white, though it is sometimes pink, that grows inside some oysters. However, oysters have a pearl inside them, which suggests that there might be something rare and precious inside Scrooge. The narrator describes Scrooge to us in Stave 1. We are told the cold within him froze his old features, nipped his potted nose, shrivelled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. This is a metaphor. A metaphor is a comparison between two things. Unlike similes, which say that one thing is like another, for instance, she is like the sun. Metaphors assert that one thing is another. So she is like the sun would become she is the sun. This is also an example of an extended metaphor. And these extend the metaphor beyond the first sentence to a series of sentences or paragraphs or even a whole story. In this extended metaphor, the adjective cold implies that Scrooge is cold-hearted, unfriendly, and uncaring. By using an extended metaphor, Dickens creates an overblown and highly exaggerated description of Scrooge as cold. And this tells us he is selfish, he is unfeeling, he's independent, and he is isolated. The narrator goes on to say that nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place. Repetition is when a writer repeats the same word or phrase several times. Through the repetition of no, Dickens presents Scrooge as an outsider to society. He is a social outcast. The repetition of no emphasises that nobody ever speaks to Scrooge. He is a very isolated character who has no friends or family. It is Christmas Eve, but Scrooge is at work, in his counting house. The weather outside is bleak. It is cold and foggy. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, and was so dense without. The imagery of the fog, pouring in at every chink and keyhole, is almost sinister, emphasising the unpleasant nature of Scrooge. Pathetic fallacy is a literary device where writers describe the weather or the setting to reveal how a character is feeling. For instance, rainy and stormy weather might reflect a character is sad and angry, whereas sunny weather might reflect a character is feeling happy. Here, Dickens uses pathetic fallacy to describe the cold, bleak, biting weather, and this reflects Scrooge's cold-hearted, miserly, and miserable nature. Remember, to gain marks in AO1, you have to show that you remember and understand key events in the novella, so take notes. The following events occur in the first part of Stave 1. We learn that Scrooge's business partner, Marley, is dead. The narrator describes Scrooge to us. We learn that he is a selfish and greedy miser. We also learn that Scrooge is an isolated outsider to society.